We are almost at the end of our 10 Commandments series as we come to number 9 today. Before we turn to it, let me make a comment about the negative framing of many of the 10 Commandments. 8 of the 10 are prohibitions, telling God's people what they are not to do. Sometimes God, religion, and Christianity in particular have a reputation for being negative, for saying no to life and enjoyment. But God says yes. You might ask then, why do so many of the commandments say no? We've seen before in our series that when God prohibits us from doing something, He prohibits it for our good. And we've observed already that when we come across a prohibition in the Bible, it's good to ask what positive intent underlies the prohibition. So, for example, God tells us not to commit adultery because faithful marriages make for flourishing communities. Here's another thought. 8 of the 10 Commandments are framed as prohibitions, it's true, but it's really a rather short list, isn't it? I mean, what would the list look like if it included everything you are allowed to do? As G.K. Chesterton wrote, "It is shorter to state the things forbidden than the things permitted, precisely because most things are permitted and only a few things are forbidden." Do you know the first command in the Bible? The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die." God's first recorded command is bon appetit. Enjoy. You are free to eat everything. Just don't eat from the one tree that will bring you death. Do you see? God says yes to life. Now let's consider the 9th of the 10 Commandments. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbour. The immediate context of the commandment is a legal one. Think of witnesses in a courtroom. Old Testament scholar Chris Wright comments, "The commandment is not simply about telling the truth in general, but about telling the truth in the place where it counts most, because that is where lying can cost most, the court of law." One of the many books looking for a home as we unpack our boxes is a trilogy of novels by Lord Jeffrey Archer. Do you know that name? Back in 1987, he sued a London newspaper, the Daily Star, for publishing claims that Archer had paid for sex with a prostitute. He won the case and was awarded a huge sum of money in damages. It turned out that he had lied in court and had fabricated evidence, writing fake diaries as an alibi. In 2001, he was convicted of perjury and perverting the course of justice, and sentenced to 4 years in prison. Lying in court is a big deal. Without all the advantages of modern forensic investigation, witnesses in the ancient world were even more vital than today. In the Old Testament, various offences were punishable by death based on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the witnesses were false, innocent people could be killed. Do you know the story of Naboth's vineyard? You can read it in 1 Kings chapter 21. There was an incident involving a vineyard belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. The vineyard was in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Ahab said to Naboth, "Let me have your vineyard to use for a vegetable garden, since it is close to my palace. In exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it is worth." But Naboth replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my ancestors." So Ahab went home sullen and angry, because Naboth the Jezreelite had said, "I will not give you the inheritance of my ancestors." He lay on his bed sulking and refused to eat. His wife Jezebel came in and asked him, "Why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat?" He answered her, "Because I said to Naboth the Jezreelite, 'Sell me your vineyard, or if you prefer, I will give you another vineyard in its place.' But he said, 'I will not give you my vineyard.' Jezebel, his wife, said, 'Is this how you act as king over Israel? Get up and eat. Cheer up. I'll get you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite.' So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, placed his seal on them, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city with him. In those letters she wrote, 'Proclaim a day of fasting and give Naboth a prominent seat among the people, but put 2 scoundrels opposite him and get them to bring charges that he has cursed both God and the king. Then take him out and stone him to death.' So the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city did as Jezebel directed in the letters she had written to them. They proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth in a prominent place among the people. Then 2 scoundrels came and sat opposite him and brought charges against Naboth before the people, saying, 'Naboth has cursed both God and the king.' So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death." Chris Wright points out that the Old Testament law recognises various temptations to false witness, including fraud and greed, slander and hatred, crowd pressure, conspiracy, misplaced favouritism, and even family loyalties. So the Old Testament law makes perjury punishable with the same punishment that the victim of the false witness would have received if found guilty. We read in Deuteronomy chapter 19. If a malicious witness takes the stand to accuse someone of a crime, the 2 people involved in the dispute must stand in the presence of the Lord before the priests and the judges who are in office at the time. The judges must make a thorough investigation, and if the witness proves to be a liar, giving false testimony against a fellow Israelite, then do to the false witness as that witness intended to do to the other party. You must purge the evil from among you. The rest of the people will hear of this and be afraid, and never again will such an evil thing be done among you. Show no pity. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. If you're thinking, "I've never been a witness in court, so this commandment doesn't really have anything to do with me," not so fast. We've seen that many of the commandments have a broader application. As Kevin DeYoung writes, what we see throughout the 10 Commandments is that each commandment often gives us the worst example of sinning in some way. So, false witness in court that leads to someone's death is the worst way of breaking the 9th commandment. But Jesus attaches the same seriousness to all speech. Our yes or no, he says, ought to carry the force of the most solemn oath. This wider concern with truth-telling in all of life doesn't begin in the New Testament. We read in Leviticus 19, for example, "Do not lie. Do not deceive one another." But there is something new and distinctive about what Jesus says in this regard, as John Dixon writes. The startling thing in the teaching of Jesus was the insistence that, for his followers, there should be no such principle as heightened truth-telling. A simple yes or no ought to have the same veracity as the most extreme form of sworn testimony. The Heidelberg Catechism outlines a broader application of the 9th commandment in the following way: that I never give false testimony against anyone, twist no one's words, not gossip or slander, nor join in condemning anyone rashly or without a hearing. Rather, in court and everywhere else, I should avoid lying and deceit of every kind. These are the very devices the devil uses, and they would call down on me God's intense wrath. I should love the truth, speak it candidly, and openly acknowledge it. And I should do what I can to guard and advance my neighbour's good name. Did you notice that, like the ninth commandment itself, the Heidelberg Catechism doesn't reflect on truth-telling as a virtue in the abstract, but on the impact that our lying and playing fast and loose with the truth can have on other people? The connection between lies and justice goes beyond the courtroom. John Dickson writes, "Think for a moment about why we lie in normal circumstances and what that says about us and about those we deceive. Most lies seem to be about deriving an invalid benefit for myself, perhaps to protect my honour, to maintain a boast, to avoid punishment, to win an argument, to rip someone off, and so on. A lie tends to belittle the deceived. It commoditizes them for my benefit. There is a terrible cost to individuals and society when lying becomes endemic. Truth-telling is part of loving our neighbour. That is reason enough for us to be truth-tellers, but there are deeper motivations for Christians. Truth and truthfulness are essential traits of God's character. So Jesus says, "I am the way and the truth and the life." We are God's people and our lives should reflect His character, but our lives are broken mirrors that don't reflect God's character clearly. And we are witnesses of Christ, called to proclaim the truth of the gospel. If our words are not trustworthy and true in other areas of life, why should people believe that our message about Jesus is true? But our words are not always true. So there is one last story about false witness that you need to hear. It comes from Mark 14, when the Jewish authorities arrested Jesus and put him on trial. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, "I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days build another, not made with hands." But even then, their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. He made no reply to the false testimony brought against him, but gave himself up willingly to an unjust execution on the cross, so that he could bear the punishment for their sins of dishonesty, and mine, and yours. For everyone who trusts in Jesus, the truth of the gospel offers the hope of forgiveness for every lie. That's a truth to treasure and to tell.